reconstruction, the repair and reconstruction of all state-owned dams, all 278 state-owned dams, and we have a separate engineering and construction section with a separate administrator that has that responsibility. And again, those folks work for me. And we have a third section. It's a dam safety section, and they inspect all the dams in the state. And there's 2,600 dams in the state. 850 of them about hazardous, and they inspect those on a regular basis. But Dan again has this large role of operating and maintaining with his operators over 200 dams on a daily basis. And during these flood times like we've had here in July, that's a pretty big responsibility. Oh, back up, the dams, a lot of the dams in New Hampshire, especially the dams that the state owns, were built in the 1800s to power the industrial revolution of the country. Like the dams on the Merrimack, they were built by the mill owners in Manchester and Lowell, Massachusetts, Lawrence and Haverhill, Massachusetts, to power the store water, to power the machinery, and then ultimately to generate electricity. But as these mills closed down and left the area, a lot of the dams got transferred over to public service in New Hampshire, and they quickly realized, or not quickly, maybe over the course of 30 or 40 years, realized they had no real use for them in their operations, but they had become important recreational resources. So the state acquired many of them from public service in New Hampshire, starting around the 50s all the way through the 80s. And the state does now own the dam on Ossipee Lake, the dam on Newfound, certainly the dam at Lake Sunapee, Squam Lake, Lake Winnipesaukee, Winnisquam, all these dams that were built in the mid 1800s, Pawtuckaway Lake, some of the big recreation lakes in the state are impounded by state-owned dams that were largely, like I say, built in the 1800s for different purposes than they are operated for today. Many of the dams that we have are what we call high hazard dams. And if they were to fail, they would cause loss of life downstream, inundate homes, and cause loss of life. And we are required to develop emergency action plans, which include inundation maps for each of these high hazard dams, which outline the area that would be inundated. And based on a collection of all those inundation maps, there are more than 4,000 houses. And this is actually a very conservative estimate. It's a sort of our first cut. And we're looking at different ways of analyzing those inundation areas using census tracts and actually getting a population within those inundation areas. And what we're finding is there are a lot more homes than our initial cut that we did about 10 years ago, which these numbers are based on. It seems like it's a lot higher than 4,000 homes. But anyway, at a minimum, you have 4,000 houses, you got 130 state road crossings, 800 town road crossings within the inundation areas of these state-owned dams. So you see there's a huge liability associated with owning them and operating and maintaining them so they don't fail. Dan has 3 dam operators that he dispatches out of Concord every day to do operations and maintenance. Dan also supervises a dam operator that lives up at Lakeport Dam, the dam that impounds Lake Winnipesaukee, and he takes care of all the dams in the Lakes region. And when I say the Lakes region, is the Merrimack River Basin. He takes care of Squam and Newfound and a couple other little lakes. Then lakes downstream on the Merrimack River, and of course Lakeport Dam itself. But the other guys, including the guys who do work out at Lake Sunapee, the 3 that Dan dispatches out of Concord. Also, I should say there's a 5th operator that lives up in the North Country. We own the Murphy Dam, which is located at the headwaters of the Connecticut River, a very large dam that's built in the 30s, and we have a dam operator that lives up there and takes care of largely the fish and game dams up in the North Country. Again, it's a lot of work. When we have floods, these pictures were taken in the 2006 and 2007 floods that we had. It's all hands on deck. My engineering construction crew, we enlist them into doing dam operations, but it's really, really treacherous work.
I did. I unmuted it.
Yeah.
Huh?
I'm sorry, was I muted? think I'm all set now. But anyway, to make our job a little bit easier, on some of these dams, we actually have remote operations. Not many of them, about 5 of the dams now that we have in our inventory have some level of automation. Doesn't completely eliminate the need for dam operators to do further operations out there, but the dam on Sunapee that we just rebuilt has remote control operations. The gatehouse at Newfound Lake down on the bottom also had those gates automatically operated, and we got Mascoma and Mascoma Lake in Lebanon and Milton Three Ponds in Milton also automated. And Dan actually can operate those from his house using a laptop with appropriate security, and also make sure that nobody can hack those systems. And we are building near you folks, Highland and Island Lake in Stoughton, also being automated right now. About 50 of the large lakes that we operate, we draw them down each year. You know, Sunapee is one of the 50 that we do the drawdown. And the reason we do the drawdowns is primarily to protect the shoreline structures from ice damage. The ice can put a real load on shoreline structures, particularly when it starts shifting, when it starts pulling away from the shoreline, but then gets wind driven up into the shoreline. Not only does it take out docks, seawalls, but also the natural shoreline can get really heaved up as well. So that's one of the reasons we do the drawdowns, but also too is to provide storage for the large inflows we get into these reservoirs in the spring due to snow melt and precipitation. This chart here really shows how that does the runoff, the amount of runoff we get, how it varies by month. The top line, this is a basin. Actually, I did this work for a basin in the southeastern part of the state, but it's applicable to really statewide. So statewide, on average, we have about 3 to 4 inches of rain each month. But the amount of runoff produced by that rain varies significantly based on the month of the year. So that in March and April, before the vegetation comes out, while we may still have some snow on the ground, while the ground is typically saturated from melting snow, we get a larger amount of that precipitation that falls, turns into runoff that runs across the ground and runs into our reservoirs. And so that's what we do our drawdowns to be able to capture this and reduce in-lake flooding. But the important point too is come July, this July being an anomaly, we get actually about 4 inches of rain, but the runoff falls way off because of the full vegetation. Soil moisture is typically low. A lot of the rainfall that does fall goes up through the vegetation and it gets evapotranspirated and also seeps into the ground, where it can't during the months of March and April because of the condition of the soil. Now for Sunapee, this is a picture here of the Sunapee Lake watershed, Sunapee Lake, our dam, and got about somewhere between 15 and 20 miles to the confluence with the Connecticut on the Sugar River in Claremont. I'm sure a lot of you folks know this, but the lake area is about 6.4 square miles. The watershed is about 44.8 square miles. And so any rainfall that falls on that 44.8 square mile watershed that turns into runoff falls into starts filling up Sunapee Lake. And so that ratio is about 7-to-1. So if if we were to get 1 inch of runoff and not 1 inch of rain, because again, runoff is only a fraction of the rain that falls, but 1 inch of runoff across that whole 44.8 square mile drainage area would raise Lake Sunapee by 7 inches if we didn't release any water from the dam. There's been a dam at the outlet of Sunapee for since 1820. the legislature, the Hampshire legislature granted the Sunapee Lake, the Sunapee Lake Dam Corporation, the authority to not only erect a dam at the outlet, but also to lower the outlet by 10 feet. And that was done typically at a lot of those lakes that I spoke of, Winnisquam, Lakeport. Not only did they erect a dam to raise the level of the lake a little bit, but they also dredged out the outlet so they could draw the lake down lower than it could be under natural conditions. This is a picture of the dam in 1922. It was an enclosed, gatehouse structure there. This is looking from downstream, upstream at the dam. Again, all enclosed in 1922. This is a picture though in 1928. The gatehouse is gone. They got this lifting, hoisting system here to hoist up the gates. And then we acquired the dam in 1981. The same story about these other acquisitions, although this one didn't come to us from Public Service in New Hampshire. It came to us from the original owners, the Sunapee Lake Dam Corporation, and their predecessors gave the dam essentially to this state. And again, we acquired that in 1981 and been operating and maintaining it ever since. The most recent maintenance we've had to do on it was back in 2019, pre-COVID. It has wooden gates. The gates, deteriorated, and we had to replace them with new wooden gates. We did that again in the fall of 2019. But the operation of the lake has to be done, or the operation of our dam has to be done in coordination with the operation of the town-owned dam, which is located on the Sugar River, just 750 feet downstream of ours, particularly during high flows. That the control of the water coming out of Lake Sunapee shifts from our dam to this town dam during high flows. And then we're talking about flows like we're releasing now. So we need to have cooperation with the town operator there to make sure that the water that needs to get released from the dam does get released. In fact, the operator here at this dam is a part-time operator. He does a lot of the gate adjustments for us at our dam. Now, the primary purpose for the state in operating this lake is for recreation. So our goal is to have this lake and all the lakes that we operate, or that we draw down in the wintertime, full by Memorial Day, which we say is the start of the recreation season. But that can conflict with other objectives. We want to avoid in-lake flooding for sure. So if we raise that lake level too soon, and if you recall that runoff, rainfall runoff curve that I had, we still have a fair amount of runoff that occurs in May, and had also some high runoff events that occur in June. If we get it up too quickly, then we run the risk of in-lake flooding. This certainly is not Sunapee, but this is an impoundment. This was on a small state-owned dam in Epping, the Bunker Pond Dam, that's since been removed because of the problems that it caused with upstream flooding. Another objective that we have is to maintain flow to the extent that we can, and to the extent that it is consistent with our recreational objective, maintain flow downstream for hydropower plants that are still there. These plants, again, were built in the 1900s, typically 1800s, in some cases, late into 1800s. And both the town dam has a hydroelectric component to it. There's a hydroelectric dam in Newport, and there's two in Claremont. And because of the operation that we do for them, that we store water that comes into the lake from floods, and then release it at a rate, oftentimes, that they can use and not waste. During floods like we're having now, all bets are off, and we're providing them with more water that they can possibly use. But because of that benefit that they get, they pay us water user fees in the orders of tens of thousands of dollars that are used, and that's really the sole source of revenue, to pay for the operation and maintenance of Sunapee Lake Dam. Another issue that we have at Sunapee Lake, not so much as Sunapee Lake as much as some of the other lakes that we manage, is maintaining in-stream flows downstream for aquatic species. We can't cut off the flow completely. Have to provide some flow for the aquatic environment downstream. And at many of our, well, some anyway, certainly Squam, Lakeport Dam, we have issues with wastewater treatment plants downstream, and we have the same thing at Sunapee Lake. This is the town of Sunapee's wastewater treatment plant that requires a minimum flow of about 7 cubic feet per second in the river to meet their discharge permit. And this was a challenge during the droughts. We did provide that flow at all times, but it was a constraint during the droughts that we had to provide at least a minimum flow. Another objective that we have is, the loons. The loons can't tolerate rapid lake level changes, and so they get here. They start showing up on the lakes as soon as ice out. We have to be cognizant of their presence and their nest laying, but it is a problem. And we start filling these lakes up in May. We don't want to be drowning their nests. And on the backside, the timing of the drawdown in the fall, we've got to start our drawdown before the aquatic species start hibernating. So things like turtles and frogs, they start hibernating in October. And what we want to do is make sure that the lake levels are down, say in November, so that we don't expose those amphibians to freezing conditions. Another issue that we have to deal with is fish spawning. And that does vary. There's a spring spawn that we've got to worry about, but here the lake trout, it's a fall spawn. And Lake Sunapee has lake trout. They spawn around Halloween. So again, we don't want the lake level to get too far below. Well, certainly not below the elevation of the spawn, but we don't want to expose their eggs. So we don't want that lake level to fall too far beyond what the lake level was when these fishes spawn. Again, just make sure that we have successful hatches. So the challenge we have is making sure that we've got the information we need to make the decisions we need to make on the operation of these standards. And again, in most cases, it's nearly a daily task, particularly say this past month of July when we've had all this rain. And so we rely on a lot of different data. We rely on flood forecasts from the National Weather Service. They have a river forecast center in Massachusetts that covers this whole region and have a number of flood forecasting points. One of them is the Sugar River at West Claremont. This is I pulled this off there today. This is the purple line here is their forecast for the remainder of the work week here. This is the actual flow in the river at that point. And they get up to that action stage, which is not quite flooding, but it's kind of an awareness stage to be prepared for the potential for minor flooding. And again, they're showing here, flows dropping off over the course of the week. But what they haven't accounted for is operational changes that we just made today that I'll be talking about in a little bit. But that again, it's a point that helps us. This gauge, again, located down in Claremont, the drainage area down at this gauge is about 270 square miles. So it does give us a good sense of the amount of or the timing of peak inflows and maybe the scale of them to help us figure out what might be the inflow into Lake Sunapee. We also rely on the network of stream gauges maintained by the U.S. Geological Survey. The state of New Hampshire pays about 60% of the cost of the operation and maintenance of this network, but they are real-time gauges that monitor the river flows largely in the state. But we also have our own, this is our state-owned, what we call our hydrologic data collection network. And these are largely lake level gauges at many of our lakes, and also some discharge measurements downstream, where we measure the outflow out of these lakes in real time. So we have 35 stations that we maintain. The data gets transmitted up to the satellite, and we have and then we have a ground receive station down in out here at our office here in Concord that collects that data from the satellite and provides us the information that we need in real time on lake levels, like Lake Sunapee. And this is actual picture of the gauging setup at Lake Sunapee at the dam. If you go at the dam on Main Street on the downstream side of the road, see a box here. That's where our equipment's located. This picture here is this is the telephone pole behind our gauge cabinet here. We got a rain gauge on the top of that pole, and right in here it's hard to make out, but that's our antenna that's pointed up to the satellite that sends the data collected on a lake level on a real time up to the satellite where we receive it. This rain gauge, honestly, under reports, I think we have issues with the tree covers and all here. We have we don't just rely on this rain gauge. There's also a good real-time, a good gauge at the airport that gives us information as well on rainfall in the area. This is a ground receive station I talked about here. So we get this information on a real-time basis and put it into our database in our computer programs. And we have developed rainfall runoff models for all these drainage areas you see here in the state, where we have the majority of the dams that we own and operate, including in purple here, the Sugar River Basin. We have a rainfall runoff model, so we know with the data that we collect on rainfall and with forecasts that we get from the Weather Service, when we apply those to these rainfall runoff models, we have a good idea of the inflow coming into the lake and make our decisions on what we need to do to operate that dam to accommodate that inflow. This is such as a schematic here of the rainfall runoff models, and takes into account soil moisture, evapotranspiration, the percolation down into the soil. It keeps track of the soil moisture condition on a real-time basis in the watershed, the amount of vegetation in the watershed, if there's snow on the ground, what the temperature of that snowpack might be, what the density of that the snowpack might be in terms of water content, and then calculates based on the rainfall forecast. This is a 72-hour quantitative precipitation forecast actually for today, for the next 72 hours in the state of New Hampshire. We import this information directly from the Weather Service, and with that information on the runoff conditions, we can then predict what the inflow might be. It's the same models used by the Weather Service, the River Forecast Center that I talked about, that provides the forecast for the Sugar River at Claremont. And then we, all the data that we collect, then we push out to our webpage for the public to see, what's going on at the lakes, what's the precipitation been, what's the the lake level now compared to full or compared to normal for this time of year. This is a schematic of the whole system. So we get gauges like that we have at Sunapee, goes up to our satellite, to our ground receive station, into our database. We import gauge data from the USGS as well as rainfall data. The quantitative precipitation forecast from the Weather Service comes into our software, our modeling software in our database. The modeling software computes inflow forecasts. We also put in manual data entry as well to correct things that we know might be off in the runoff model. And then we push out that data to our web page. So the web page, I want to make you all aware of that if you're not already, that you can monitor the lake level at Sunapee Lake in real time, the precipitation, how much water we're discharging from the dam. That can all be monitored in real time. This is the homepage for DES. This is www.des.nh.gov. You click on this helpful links on the homepage, and you can see here river and lake levels. You click on that line, and it presents this page here, which is real-time data information for all the watersheds in New Hampshire where we have all this equipment. And again, click on the purple one for the Sugar River, and it comes up with not only the Sugar River, but the Katuka and the Sauhegan, where we also have some dams. Click on Sunapee Lake, and here is actually the current. This was as of 2 o'clock today. And actually this is a screen capture, so this is, if you get on it right now, it'd be a little bit more up to date. But you can see where the lake level is. With the rainfall that we had, it jumped up, over before the weekend, then jumped up again with the weather we had over the weekend. And so now, this lake level now starting to fall a little bit, but we are at a gauge elevation of 11.25, which is 9 inches above our full elevation, our normal full elevation. You see here, we made some changes to the outflow, jumped it up here to about 200 cubic feet per second yesterday, and jumped it up again to about 265, I think we're releasing right now, with the cooperation of the folks that operate the town dam, getting that up there to try to match out outflow. Also, you can get the precipitation, that gauge that I showed you, that tipping bucket at the dam has collected. And as I say, that's really underreported here, because if you look, this is the hourly precipitation. Down below here is the daily precipitation, and at the airport, the numbers are far different than what we're measuring here. And so if you do look at this, know that it typically is underreporting. So if we're getting 7/10 of an inch, it's likely, reporting 7/10 of an inch, it's likely to be a bit higher. And a better data source would be the gauge at the airport. Also, if you would, let's see if I go back here. Yeah, so on this here, if you click down this link here, current watershed operations, we try to let folks know what we're doing. If you click on that, you get this current watershed operations for those bases that are shown on that screen capture. And in Sunapee Lake, the current elevation, as I say, 11.24, then which is about 9 inches above full, and the release rate, I think, at that time was 200 CFS, and we're trying to push it up to 300. But again, working with the dam operator downstream, at these levels, they have the control, and we have to work with them there. They've already made an adjustment. I think they're going to have to make another adjustment for us to get to our goal of 300 CFS release. These are our operation guidelines. Again, a normal summer operating range between 9.5 and 10.5. We try to get the lake level, full to 10.5 by the start of by Memorial Day, as I say. And the summer discharges varies. It's about 40 CFS, cubic feet per second of water, to 7. 7 is the lowest we possibly go because of the constraint with the downstream wastewater treatment plant. The drawdowns, we begin them on Columbus Day. We draw it down at a rate of about 80 to 150 cubic feet per second. And this is the optimal rate for the hydropower plants downstream. Anything beyond 150 cubic feet per second, they start spilling water and they waste it. So to the extent that we can, we try to draw it down at a rate that they can use that water. For sprinkler, we maybe stop bumping up a little bit depending on the snowpack. Our dam operators go out and measure the snowpack in that Sunapee watershed every 2 weeks, starting in January. And when they not just measure the depth of water, the depth of the snow, because that's not really of much interest to us. What's interest to us is how much water content is in that snowpack. And so we make a decision on whether to stop bumping that lake up based on the presence or absence of a dense snowpack. So last year, and I say even this spring, we didn't have much of a snowpack at all. And so that, not only at Lake Sunapee, but on other lakes, that dictated us to stop bumping that lake level up to make sure that we could get it to fill. But we're very careful about the ice. We don't want to bring it up too fast when we still have ice. And we want to get it up to 10.5 by Memorial Day. And then, typically it jumps up to 11, during, while we're trying to fill this thing up. And, we'll get a rain event that will typically bring that up to 11. For storm operations, we start increasing, discharges when we get up above 10.5. When we get to 11, which we've exceeded now by about 3 inches, we have the town open up its gate. It's got a waste gate associated with that dam. They're wasting water there, but we need them to open up that waste gate to get 250 cubic feet per second out. And then we do know, I want you to know, we do have flowage, and this flowage rights came to us. The original dam owners had those flowage rights to flow land to elevation 11.5, but it's something we try to avoid at all costs. When I say a gauge, this is a gauge. The gauge is at, right next to the dam. That's the elevation reference that I was speaking of here. How are we doing now? So this is a map that I grabbed this morning of the 5-day precipitation that's occurred in the state. And you look at, here Tuesday. So it's for 5 days, Tuesday, Monday, Sunday, something like Friday. And, we see you get about 3 inches of rain, and that was on top of the rain that we get early in the season. And for the month of July, at the airport, we've measured over 9.5 inches of rain, and that's more than double the amount of rain we normally get in the month of July. And as a result, the lake level is up. This is a chart here showing the lake level in red. What it also shows, and this is based on a period of record here of about 40 years, from 1981 to 2020, is the average lake level, and that's in blue. And that's kind of a guide curve that we try to operate to the average. Also, in dashed is the minimum the lake has been on these dates, and the maximum. And you can see here, the maximum back in, I'm not sure what year it was, Dan, but it was, it was exceeded 12.5 there at some time in May. This is this green line here is the discharge, and this purple line is the inflow into the reservoir. So we typically get some inflow, melting snow, a rain event that occurred at the end of March that brought that lake level up. We try to gauge our outflow here to try to get back to that average curve. But we were concerned at this time, honestly, with the drought. We've been in a drought that's lasted over a year, and we didn't see any long-term projections about that drought ending. Certainly, I like to think, I think actually groundwater is still lagging, even with this rain that we've had. But certainly in terms of surface waters, we've had a good bit of relief from the drought because of the rain that we've had. And this last curve is a curve of the rainfall. And so it's cumulative by month. And ours is also cumulative here by month. But this is a bit deceiving because we started the year with about a 7 or 8 inch deficit in rainfall over the previous years. So we stopped this at 0. You can see here, since the beginning of the year, it's kind of, we've been getting pretty close to the rainfall we got until July, and then really things jumped up. And you can see here how that inflow has really jumped up. And our discharge now here, I think this is showing, this is from this morning, showing the 200 CFS discharge, but we're getting it up to 300. And we don't expect a lot of rain over the next 72 hours, mostly falling down in the Cape and in Massachusetts. Here you can see this is this area here where the watershed's located. We don't expect 100 over the next 72 hours. So with our discharges, it's not as a result of our forecast model. With our discharge of 300 CFS and the inflow that we are forecasting, we should be getting the lake back down to the normal summer level of 10.5, within a week. That's my presentation. Ooh, I did go a lot longer than I thought. I'm sorry. I wanted to leave about 30 minutes for questions. I think we only got about 20 minutes, but that's the presentation. Be happy to answer any questions. And if I misspeak, I think Dan will bail me out.
Great. Thanks, Jim. I'm going to start reading off the questions. Do you want to continue to share the screen, so you may go? Okay, because you can always reshare it if you want to show a graph or something.
Yeah, I guess I'll stop sharing, but I may want to refer to a graph.
Right. Okay. So let me start up. Oh, okay, here we go. Let me start off at the top. The first question we've had is, what would happen if the dam at Lake Sunapee were removed?
Good question. I have to get back with you on that. At high flows, the town dam downstream, 750 feet downstream, starts controlling the elevation downstream of our dam. So at high flows, it'd still be less. If it was removed, I'd have to tell the truth. Get back. It's a very good question. I don't know the answer, Dan. I'm not sure the relative elevation of the spillway of the town dam to the normal lake level. Do you happen to know?
I don't offhand, but you did mention the fact that the channel leading after the dam was deepened originally, so
Yeah,
it would not go back to normal. We would not go back to normal original conditions. It would
Right.
be still unnatural.
so to answer the question, I would say it would be perhaps the lake elevation would be at the elevation of the spillway of the town dam. I don't know that. I'll get that, and somehow Kathleen or Truff, somehow, if we can, get that information to the person who asked the question.
Okay, great. We're going to go to the second question here. I saw October 13th as the drawdown date for Sunapee. Is that flexible at all based on lake level?
It's so it's Columbus Day, then it's Columbus Day could be early, and Columbus Day could be a little later. We do drawdowns at 50 of them. So the operators, it's largely these, the three guys that get dispatched out of Concord do it. So they do it over a course of a few days. But we've been getting some pressure from lakeshore property owners, knowing that October's been getting warmer and warmer over the years, and they like to continue boating if they can. But we get severe pushback from Fish and Game about delaying those drawdowns, the start of those drawdowns beyond Columbus Day, because of the concern about the aquatic species and fish spawning and those sort of things. So we don't have a lot of flexibility there now. To answer the question.
Well, very, very quickly too, with we do fill the lake up, in May and for June 1st, but it does naturally drop throughout the summertime anyway. So
good point there, Dan. Yeah, so you and I'll be sharing this my presentation with the association here, so folks can refer to it again. But if you looked at that chart that I did show about kind of where we were, that had the precipitation, the inflow, outflow, the lake level over the course of over the year, you see that lake level, that trend, that average line trends downward over the course of the summer, because of evaporation, like Dan mentioned, and also minimum releases as well.
Okay. So the next question is, how long will it take for Lake Sunapee to drop 12 inches from its current level, which is 1 inch from the top of the dock surface?
Yeah, so 12 inches. Well, we're doing the 9 inches, and then the 9 inches, I say, um, based on the outflow rate now and inflow projection, it's going to be a week. To get it down an inch, I think it's, should be, I like to think, it's starting to turn. If you saw that, it's starting to turn a little bit, certainly leveling off. It's not increasing. So I think, shoot, by Thursday, I think it's going to be off the dock.
Okay.
Not earlier, okay.
All right. The last question that I have, that's so anybody else has any more, now's the time to ask them. The last question is, who is the one individual that is responsible for the level of Lake Sunapee on a daily/weekly basis?
God. Ultimately, we are at the mercy of rainfall for sure, but the operational decisions are made, on a routine basis by Dan. He works with the operator of the town dam to make the operation, the operations needed. Dan suggests something that the owner of the town dam has other issues with managing the flows out of his dam. So there's a little bit of a give and take there. But when we get into issues like, the trade-offs now, then Dan and I engage and we discuss it. But so I'd say it's a combination of Dan and I. You're looking at the two people, besides God, that has some say in this.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions that came in. So the next one is, many of the factors used to control flows, for example, wildlife, spawning, flooding, minimum flows, seem similar to that imposed on the large hydro plants in the Connecticut River. How have your practices evolved over the years to take into account the environment?
That's a good question. Very good question. That in-stream flow requirement is new. It's growing. We have, we've got designated rivers in the state. Sugar River isn't one of them. That is designated for an in-stream flow program. That's spreading. Right now, it's on the Lamprey. It's on the Sauhegan. They're working on a couple of other rivers, and dams and impoundments are looked at as sources of water to maintain in-stream flows. We over the course of, I've been here 20 years. We've gotten a lot more sensitive to downstream flow needs, and we, generally speaking, can't button up these dams, completely to hold back all the water for the lake at the expense of the river. And then the in-stream environmental concerns too. We've gone, I think, grown a lot more sensitive to that. After all, we're the Environmental Services Department. We weren't. Our predecessor agency was the Water Resources Board, and they really were focused more on, managing for the lakes. And then with that, that agency got folded into the Department of Environmental Services, and with that, I think, grew a greater awareness of some of these other issues that other groups in the department are really concerned with. The Watershed Management Bureau, for one, and our relationship with Fish and Game. We took over the operation of their dams in around 2005 and 2006, so we have a lot more interaction with them than we had before. We took over those dams because we were responsible for the repair and reconstruction, and the guys who were operating those dams were the conservation officers that had plenty of other things to do. And as a result, they probably didn't keep spillways clean in some cases, but dams overtopped and failed. Instead of a small operation and maintenance expense, we have now a large reconstruction expense. And so the state realized that it's probably best for us to operate those dams, and we got an extra operator to do that. But so kind of a long way to answer the question about this interrelationship we have with Fish and Game. We really check with them on our operations constantly. We have questions about alternative operations. We certainly run it by them, and they have a huge say in it, or we put a lot of weight in what they have to say about it. And then when we have to do drawdowns, emergency drawdowns, or drawdowns for repair and reconstruction projects, we coordinate with them as well to reduce the impact to the fisheries into waterfowl.
Okay, so our next question is, could you remind me what are the reasons we have two dams on the lake?
Well, good question. I think the one on Sunapee predated the town dam, but not by much. The one so in Sunapee, they got the legislative authorization in 1820. I think the dam was built several years later, and then it was in the 1800s that the town dam got built. And the town dam was originally built to provide, small impoundment where they had the water supply was taken out of that small impoundment between our dam and their dam, or the town dam. That was the original purpose. Public Service in New Hampshire built a hydropower station at the town dam. They abandoned that and I think dismantled that in the late 60s or 70s. And then the town reestablished hydropower generation in the 80s at that site. But yeah, the town, again, the town dam, the original purpose was to provide a sort of a backwater there where they could put their water supply in to supply water to the town.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're at
Go ahead.
similar elevations, so they have to work together because they're just so close. If the town dam was much lower, our dam would control the flow all the time, but because they are so close in elevations, they have to work together.
Okay, so our next question is, during previous summers, there have been issues with the lake level becoming so low that it begins affecting recreational use. Have there been any operational changes that would help prevent this from happening in the future? Obviously not a problem this year, but has been an issue in the past. It seems to be water right related issues. And I'm going to go to the next question because they're similar. The level of the lake has only been an issue too high, too low at certain times of the year in the past 3-4 years. What has changed? And those look like our last questions.
Okay, I don't know. Let's say we went through a drought, and so we were sensitive to that drought and operated in March and April a little bit higher than the average. Josh, I don't know if you could read that. I don't want to miss the point of the first question.
Okay, yeah. So it just said during previous summers, there have been issues with lake level becoming so low, beginning affecting recreational use.
Yeah.
Have there been any operational changes that would help prevent this from happening in the future?
No, essentially those operation guidelines is what we use that I had on the slide, and those have been largely in place since 1904, some agreement in 1904. But we are engaging in a dialogue that Dan's initiated with the towns, the town administrators, and the LSPA as well, who's actually hosted the meetings we had with the town administrators, trying to see if for the to increase the use and enjoyment of the lake, if we need to make some operational changes. So we just we started that discussion before COVID, and then it got kind of delayed because of COVID. But we restarted that, and so folks have we run the risk if we maintain at a higher level. Let's say we maintain it at 11 at the start. It went right to 11 at the start of the recreation season, and then over the course of the summer, evaporation, we lose maybe a half a foot, and that would be at 10 and a half maybe by September, maybe something less. But at 11, you run the risk of doing significant flooding. We have flowage to 11 and a half. Person already said that their dock right now is under water. We're about 3 inches above 11. We're not at that full flowage. And so you run that risk. And we hope that the tools we've developed in terms of gauging, real-time data collection, rainfall runoff modeling, and we are actually updating our rainfall runoff model. Those models are essentially 20 years old. There's been, developments that we're going to be taking advantage of. We're spending a couple $100,000 on upgrading that inflow model. So that's going to probably help us. Certainly, it's going to look out a little further in the weather forecast, and I think help us better predict the inflow. But it's all like it's a long-winded answer to trying to do the best we can and trying to get some public input about just those questions that were asked.
Okay, great. So that's all our questions. So Jim and Dan, thanks for taking the
thank you.
time out this evening and giving a great presentation
Great.
and I seeing those nice web pages of where people can go and look, hopefully people will see. I mean, I think that's great information. I think it helps explain too,
Yeah.
Some of the management that you do. So
Yeah, good. And maybe then people can Monday morning quarterback and
right.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for attending on this nice evening.